mean, when I started, my first try, I went out into the field with a mate and with some tin foil that I put under his face, and it made him look like an alien.
I think you have to go with your gut, like most things in life.
Yeah.
I think that you have to do your research, you have to be well informed, but ultimately you have to go with what you feel.
It's a collaboration between the actor and the photographer, and when that collaboration is at its best, that's when the photographs are at their best.
Also, the term photogenic, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't really exist. So, not for headshots. If you come in for a headshot session, you need to look like what you look like.
Hello and welcome to the Young Performers podcast. So what next? So, for the last 4 weeks, we've been chatting to 4 of the UK's leading headshot photographers: Michael Shelford, Robin Savage, Stephen O'Doherty from Samuel Black Photography, and Wolf Marlowe. So this week, we're going to be taking highlights from all of their interviews. So without further ado, please enjoy this headshot special.
Well, my first advice to anyone wanting to do photography is you need to have a camera and take pictures. It's literally that simple. Nothing will beat you going and taking pictures. And it's the same. You can study acting to death, and actually you have to occasionally go on stage and say some lines and listen to some people and interact and all that, and your acting will get better.
So it's easy to beat yourself up and go, oh, that photo looked rubbish that I took of my mate the other day. And so just being okay with that and going, yeah, but that doesn't mean you're bad, you just need to work on it and keep going. That was a big moment, because I think it's quite easy to go, nah, these photos are terrible, I'm giving up, I'm an awful photographer, which is a shame because you want to keep going.
Assisting a photographer is a really good way to get into the industry, but you have to be prepared that the photographer's mostly interested in you being able to probably these days do some Photoshop, understand computers, possibly fix computers, and most importantly carry all his equipment or her equipment. I don't think he really took an interest in what I was doing until 2 years into me assisting. When I showed him a shot and he was like, Wolfie, it's very good, you're going to suffer for the rest of your life. And I was very proud. I sort of thought, finally, the master has approved the shot I took.
And then as a kind of way of making a mark in like I said, what is already a really oversaturated industry, it's about having a unique voice, having a unique quality to your photos which people aren't really doing. And that comes from just your imagination. That comes from you. It's got to be something that you like shooting, something that you feel is a really good way to photograph actors. And that can be something you just come across, something you stumble across. But it's you'll find it if it's there. You'll
Get a style. Whether people think it's polarizing, get a style. Very quickly I realized that was the key. You can look at a headshot photographer and know immediately who took those shots. Get a style, whether for good or for bad, get a style.
It's the laziest form of business, because every headshot you do is a free advert as long as it's not terrible. Yeah. Because that actor takes that headshot and intentionally shows as many people as possible to get their career out there, which then kind of like a parasite, you're sort of on the back there. So it's really easy. I didn't do any promotion, I didn't really do any advertising. I put a website up and it just slowly, the ball starts rolling a bit. I think I was slightly reluctant to push it, because you don't want to shove it in people's faces and be like, look at me, because that's slightly off-putting. Yeah. So I was like, if people want to shoot with me, that's fantastic. I'm up for that, and we'll just sort of see what happens. Yeah.
I've known assistants who assisted for 8 years and had stopped taking their own photographs almost. And you can become a really good assistant in the way that you can become really good at running a pub or whatever it is. And actually, if you really want to do something, you have to keep doing it and not let the other stuff encroach too much, I think.
I think you, as a photographer, you suddenly learn to see light, like the penny sort of drops. And when you kind of first start, I'm talking about my own experiences here, of course it could be different for everyone, but my experience is when you first start, you sort of don't know what you're looking for. You're in a park or wherever it is, just with a mate doing, or an actor just doing some photos, and you're sort of just having a bit of a stab around in the dark and seeing what comes out. And But then I remember there was a moment where I suddenly could sort of see light and see it on or it's actually, do you know what, I can phrase it even better. It's about, you see it in your head first. So it's about, that's actually a really good tip for photographers. It's about, you see the photo in your head before you take the photo. So you have a clear idea of what you want to take as a photograph, and that's true of if you're a headshot photographer or a landscape photographer or whatever, you know. See the photo first in your head and then work out about how you go around getting that photo.
I don't want to feel that I'm now taking the shot. I think with every shot I'm willing for it to be a shit shot and for it to be thrown away. So it's almost, I guess it's an attitude with which you would go into a rehearsal. You can fail, you can play, you're not trying to nail something. I think the harder you try doing anything or achieving anything, the more likely you're failing. And so giving yourself permission to fail is really important.
Every headshot that I love is usually a fluke because, you know, the headshot before it and the headshot after it might not be as striking. It just happened to be that exact angle in that environment, in that top, as they were pulling that sort of facial expression. No, because I think if I had the answer to that, I would do that every single time.
Yeah.
But that's why I like headshots, is because they're all completely unique and every single person is completely different.
Let's say one of the things that ties together really successful headshots is a kind of, I suppose I'd say, enthusiasm. No, I don't mean you know, being really, really keen and really green and coming across as kind of over-eager, that sort of thing. That's not what I mean. I think some of the biggest challenges let's flip it on its head and say some of the biggest challenges I've had to face in headshot sessions is when somebody comes in and they really, really don't want to be photographed. And again, you know, a million people will say to me that they don't like having their picture taken, and I get that. You know, it's the most common thing, really. But people come in sometimes and they put up such a high emotional barrier that I have to sort of pick my way through that before I can start to access them, if that makes sense, before I can start to understand who they are and how we can photograph them and those sorts of things. The most successful sessions have been the flip side of that. So the people who will come in and just be really keen just to get on with the session with a really sort of, it sounds a cliche, but a really sort of positive outlook towards it, ready to go, ready to trust the photographer. Because like I said,
The main thing for me is if people shut down, like nerves, like I've seen nerves like you wouldn't believe. I've seen panic attacks, vomiting, crying, like a lot of people, myself included, like cannot stand having their photo taken, and it can really, really be a horrible experience running up to it, thinking I've got to have my photo taken. And some people shut down by just, they go into you know, safe mode and just they won't talk, they won't you know, react, and that can be quite tricky because at the end of the day it's 2 hours just me and one person, so if they don't talk it can get a little bit awkward because it's just me sort of asking them endless questions and then, you know, but that doesn't happen that often actually. Actors are very open people, I think, and are very sociable people, and so that's very rare that happens.
I guess that's what I enjoy about meeting people. When you leave here today, you're a different person for having met me, and I'm a different person for having met you, and what, you know, the interview has changed us both, and that's the same with every session you do. And as long as you're open to that, to be affected by people you meet, it's a wonderful experience. I think people get very shy about this whole thing. Like the photographer is some sort of big important portal through which you have to pass, and you have to, you know, you book, you pay them all this money, they have someone famous on their portfolio, so they're probably really mean, and they fly everywhere in helicopters, and of course they're just normal people with, you know, they fart, they have hair on their shoulders or whatever, they have, you know, they also have hangovers, and so you can ask them questions. You don't have to worry about it. You can email them and ask them questions, and if you have anything that you're unsure about, and there might be, or you call them, and likewise, actually, when you're there at the session, if you feel the shots aren't working, you tell the photographer. You know, there's ways of saying it. You don't have to say they're really shit, but you explain what you don't like. Find a way of working with the photographer.
You know, if I've got terrible flu, the last thing I want is someone to take my photo because I look awful. I look terrible. And so, you know, that confidence in yourself to go, no, I'm feeling okay, that won't be there, and that will probably show a little bit. But I would always advise, if you're feeling ill, to flag it up with the photographer a couple of days before, because usually they can swap someone.
Yeah.
If someone says to me, I'm feeling really ill, can we postpone it by a week? It's fairly easy to get someone to bring their session forward by a week. So I would usually say definitely flag it up with the photographer rather than try and get through a dicky tummy or something like that. You know, try and get through it.
Make them laugh. Really, make them laugh. I never, very rarely, unless a client's natural sort of smile in front of the camera is very good, I will never ask a client to smile, but I will tell quite self-deprecating, often dad jokes, to sort of get that out of them. And you know, I find it does work. And of course, you know, it's not me necessarily, but it works. And you know, just make them laugh, get them comfortable, make them laugh.
For example, smiles happen. If you don't have an utter chemistry mismatch with the person that comes in, and obviously that's possible, there will be a giggle in the shot somewhere.
If someone wants to go for something really bright, smiley, warm, whatever, it's about being committed to the smile and the smile having energy. And I'm sure we've all heard it a million times. You know, it's what's happening in the eyes. It's whether it's a genuine smile or not. It's not what's happening in the mouth, but what's happening in the eyes. We probably all know that. But by putting a little chuckle to yourself, and it can feel quite weird first of all when you first do it. But by putting a little giggle or something like that, that suddenly brings commitment and life to the smile. And in a two-dimensional image, that can actually work quite well.
What I don't think makes it any easier to be photographed, looking in the mirror and practicing poses, I don't think, or looks, I don't think is necessary.
I talk to people a lot and I ask them a lot of questions. The reason for that is because they're questions where I get people to think. So I'm not going to just say, what's your favourite colour, or what did you have for tea last night? You know, it's a question where it's nothing too heavy, nothing too personal, but a question where I get people to think. Because what happens then is that split second after the question lands, suddenly the brain is engaged, the eyes are engaged, and that's when you get some really nice headshots. When they just for a split second, they're taken away from the fact that they're having their headshots done, because they're now the thought has entirely changed in their head. And I'm not prescriptive about people. I don't say think of this, think of that. I'll ask them a question which is personal to them. I said, like I said, not too personal, but you know, that only they'll know the answer to, and that engages them. That gets everything switched on.
Because I wanted to use natural light. That natural light is different every single day. So the light today is completely different to yesterday, and being able to adapt to that. Because I was finding I'd get a setup that I loved, and I'd be like, oh yeah, this looks great, this is awesome. And then I'd come in the next day and it'd be completely different, and I feel like I'm back to square one.
Outside, it's going to look a little bit more what you'd call natural, a little bit softer maybe. Inside, using just studio lights, I can get a much more dramatic look with much deeper shadows and things like that. Now that's relevant because it's about what you want from the photo. If you want something from the session, if you want something really hard hitting, good for like TV dramas like Happy Valley or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Then we can come in the studio and we can be really creative with the lighting and do something really cool, which creates a really nice kind of shape to the face and adds that drama. So there isn't a right or wrong thing. There isn't, like, it's not like daylight is better than studio light, which is, like I say, I think from what I've heard is the kind of typical belief. It's about what's going to give you the right photos for you.
My studio, which is natural light and outdoor, I say the huge difference is the British weather is a nightmare. So it can be gale force winds, and actually it can be raining, and I can still photograph with natural light in here. When I first started, there was an amazing tunnel that I used to use, and it was really beautiful light. It just was so lovely. But I would say 3 out of 5 days of the week you couldn't shoot next, it was too windy. And you don't want to be battling against the elements when you're trying to get someone to relax and stuff. And that would be the main thing. Like if we all lived in LA and we just had that amazing sunshine the whole time, then I would probably shoot outside all the time. But yeah, here you know what the weather's like. Even in the summer, you've got torrential downpours and you can't stand up because it's so windy. But that's the main thing for me. That's the only reason. and also it's cold.
Yeah.
You know, trying to you can't really Photoshop someone's feeling really cold out. Do you know what I mean? Red nose, streaming eyes, hair everywhere. They look a little bit tense.
Yeah.
That would be the main thing. Is the uphill struggle with the weather.
How would you say an actor can know if their headshot is wrong for them? Or
Well, I think your hit rate for work will go down because if you're being called into auditions and your photo is out of date, it doesn't look like you, it doesn't say the right thing about you, about who you are as an actor anymore, then you're going to be kind of called in for the wrong things. So if it's probably a good indicator that your headshots are out of date if your hit rate for work's going down. But also, I mean, I always say to people, talk to other people you know who you trust, and really ideally somebody in the industry, someone who knows what a headshot is all about. You know, not your mum or something like that. You know, talk to someone, and they can use because you can't look at a photo of yourself objectively. It's impossible to look at a photo of yourself and see yourself the way that the rest of the world sees you. So if you can talk to somebody and say, look, what's this headshot doing for me? You know, is it working? Is there anything going on with it? And if they can look at it and say, well, I know you as an actor. I know your process. I know the kind of work you do and the kind of thing you do on stage. You know, your thing as an actor. This photo absolutely has that going on, or that photo doesn't have that going on at all. If it does have it going on, then obviously you can probably hang on to that photo for another 6 months, a year, whatever. But if there's a disconnect between who you are as an actor and your photo that you're using, and you know that, you find that out through whatever means, then yeah, it's probably time to get new headshots.
Just look at their work and look at their website. Like, I think as photographers, we all try and put our sort of own voice in the copy on our website, so you kind of understand what we're like as people as well, because you know it's pretty odd. You're going to meet some random man or woman that takes 500 photos of your face doing nothing for 2 hours. So yeah, I would say if you like their work on the website, you can imagine you in a shot like that, and you like the sound of them, then they're probably right for you. It's unlikely that there's a photographer out there that you'd go, oh yeah, they're definitely wrong for me. Unless you don't like their photography. If you like their shots, you know, it's their job to make sure they're right for you when you book them, really. I mean,
it's a really oversaturated market now. When I sort of turned professional, should we say, 10 years ago, it was, or in fact, even when I was an actor, when I graduated 2000, so that 99-2000 period when we were first getting our headshots done, I mean, there was probably, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 main photographers who you'd go to. But these days, I mean, there's hundreds. You know, it's with the advent of digital photography. You know, people kind of just can pick up a camera and head down to their local bridge or whatever and start shooting some stuff. You know, so there is you're right. It's quite a minefield and it's kind of oversaturated. I think again, if you mentioned sort of the second years, you know, getting their first headshot session. Usually, drama schools have a list of recommended photographers, and the reason why they're recommended is because they're people who've been tried and tested by the school. So they're people who will, a good headshot photographer will have the technique and the understanding and the setup to sort of get good headshots from really anybody who walks through the door. That's the kind of the mark, I think, of a professional headshot photographer, someone who's been doing it a long time. So there'll be lists of drama schools which you can access. Quite a good thing, I suppose, as well, if we're talking specifically about being at drama school, is you can look at the current third years and look at their headshots and talk to them, see who went with who had really successful sessions, who had perhaps less successful sessions for whatever reason, but also look at their headshots and see which photos are really good casting portraits of that person in the third year. And there might be a photo which really speaks to you, which you look at it and think that's the exact photo of James. You know, that's the perfect casting photo for him. Who did your photo? So that's a good way to do as well. Talk to the guys who've been through it all already and see what and see who they went to.
Would you say there's a massive difference between an empty shot and a straight acting shot, or what is your thought and opinion on
No, I wouldn't say so. No, I mean there definitely used to be. There still is a difference. In the broadest sense, but there used to be much more so. When I was graduating from drama school, actors wore a black t-shirt and looked very serious, and musical theatre people probably still wore a black t-shirt but just smiled a lot, or something like that. So,
as an actor, I would have said that a musical theatre headshot tends to be more glamorous and a bit more maybe say a studio shot or a, you know, just something with a bit more commercial value to it, whereas an acting headshot maybe would tend to be a bit more gritty and a bit more natural. Now that's what I would have said as an actor, but actually as a photographer, if someone's paying for your style, me personally, I don't really make differences. I find very often my clients come because the musical theatre clients I have tend to be maybe more hybrids, you know, more sort of actors who are going into me, or actors that cross over, or you know, something of that sort of ilk. But I have shot pure musical theatre and I have shot pure actors, and but I personally don't make any differences.
Well, actually, let's say something quite a kind of period look, something kind of quite softish maybe. If you've got a kind of let's say for a girl, let's say a kind of a blouse with a little bit of lace on it, and they kind of pin their hair half up. That can be a really nice period look for your Ibsens or Shakespeare or something like that. But that would also work perfectly well for something like Parade, you know, or any kind of other legit kind of piece of musical theatre. It doesn't have to be pigeonholed as a musical theatre headshot or an acting headshot. Yes, there are still differences. I still see, let's say students from musical theatre only schools, they'll come in with their makeup might be a little bit heavier, perhaps, and will be a little bit more glam, perhaps, something like that, and that's okay. Those have their places, you know. If you're a bit more dance based or something like that, they have their places. But my thought is that you're an actor, you're a performer. That's what your headshot needs to be about. It needs to be about who you are.
How do you personally know when you found like a good shot? What is it about? What's the tip like?
Well, I think for me it's that the background is interesting enough, but it's not distracting. Because I think really if someone's looking at your headshot going, that's a good background, then you failed. If they're not looking at you. So yeah, if there's an interest, there's a bit of interest in the back, but not too much that it's distracting. And trends, you know, there are trends. When I left drama school, everyone was leaning up against a brick wall. Everyone. And that sort of died out a little bit. My first headshots, I was leaning up against a brick wall.
You work with a photographer. I always get suspicious when someone emails me and says they want to use me as a headshot photographer, because I think you use a Hoover or a computer, but you don't use a person. You don't use an actor in a show or use a director to direct a movie. You work with. It's always I think this whole industry is like that, and I think it's a mindset where you go, I'm going to give you some money, and then you're going to do this thing for me.
The three things I say to people is what kind of actor are you, what your strengths are as an actor, and the kind of parts that you want to be going for, your casting. And you've got to bring tops that reflect that. This happened a few years ago. There was a woman who came in for a session, and she's a lovely lady, and she said she'd reached that point in her life where she wanted to be playing sort of more high status parts, sort of in the legal side of things, be it barristers or detective inspectors or that kind of stuff, you know, things quite strong, quite high status. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. Visually looking at you, I think that's really good casting for you. And then all she'd really brought was kind of like 2 or 3 pink and green Gap t-shirts. Now that presents a bit of a problem for a headshot photographer, because how do you get that look with just those tops? So it's a big thing. And I think I would say to people, it's much better to bring much more and have too much than to not have enough.
My point of view, I always like it if they bring too many tops rather than too little, so that we've got enough variety. We probably might only use 6 of them, but it's better to be, over prepared than under.
No, I would advise with clothes, just bring things you feel comfortable in, bring things that suit your body, bring things that you would audition in, for whatever that is. A lot of people bring, a lot of actors would bring sort of a classic black jumper and things like that. I always recommend more of a grey than a black, but yeah, it's something you have to feel comfortable in. It's something you feel shows you off to your best. In terms of haircuts and things, I always say don't do it the day before. Do it, maybe a week or 2 weeks. Most of my rescheduling appointments with my clients, they tend to be because they've had a botched haircut, or they've had an audition come up, but it's largely a botched haircut, and so never do it the day before ever. In terms of what I think is the most important thing to do to prepare for a shoot, have a good night's sleep. Just don't go out the night before. Just have a good night's sleep. Drink lots of water. Again, that's not necessarily a be-all, end-all thing. It just makes my life in Photoshop a lot easier later. But just have a good night's sleep. Come fresh, because the most important thing in a client, I think, is to be relaxed and to be willing to play, as I say.
In the run-up to a shoot, just look after yourself a little bit. Like, don't go to a club the night before the session. Get some sleep, drink lots of water, don't overdo, cigarettes and alcohol and caffeine and all that. Just it's basic. If you
don't have too many crazy nights out running up to it. I did have one lad that showed up for headshots at 10 a.m. and he'd been out till like 3 a.m. the night before, so he clearly didn't listen, but he must have had a good night. I always try and say get a good night's sleep, but then the problem with that is if you tell someone to get a good night's sleep, they won't be able to sleep. So I'm saying, don't think of a pink elephant. I mean, it's going to cause them problems. So I think as long as you come with an open mind, it's handy to know the kind of things you want to do. I'm never annoyed with someone for being over-prepared. Like, if someone says, I want this, 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 and this, that's great, because I can follow their tick list. That's not a problem for me.
When someone comes in and says, okay, I want to nail this shot and this shot and this shot, and it's like an arrogant one and a smiley one and a whatever one, I always sort of try and I will always say yes. Can't give away too many of my secrets here, but I actually try and make them forget it, because it will be there. It will be in the shot. You can't really force it. We can go for that and we can say, okay, you're now in the back street holding a knife.
the crowbar.
Exactly. But actually what it does is it makes you go into your head and you start imagining what you're doing, and you sort of disappear a little bit. So you go into your imagination, and likewise, we can say, okay, you're the best friend. Imagine I'm your friend, and you're really, and we're having a little joke, and you're sort of going, haha. And again, it sort of becomes a little bit phony. So I know that works for some people. Using a scenario. You're standing at the bar and there's a beautiful, woman coming in and you, whatever. But it doesn't really work for me. So I find that actually in the normal conversation, your face will make so many expressions that without actually trying to force anything, the friendly guy and the crowbar wielding person will all be there.
Well, certainly, you can push it a little bit, so you've got some different sort of character type shots, but I think your main headshot wants to be you looking good on a good day, looking comfortable, relaxed, looking like the person that someone wants to have in a rehearsal room or on a set. That's the most important thing for me. And then obviously once we've got that in the bag, then we might push it so that we go, all right, let's see some of the darker side of you, or the lighter side of you, and the younger side of you, that kind of thing.
That's really important, I think, to really coldly, objectively look at your face.
Having a strong idea about what you want, but then also listening to the photographer about what they think would work really well for you, and about being really committed to their direction. So if they say, do you know what I think would be a great look for you is X, Y, and Z, and you hadn't have thought of that, if you put up a bit of resistance to that, it's not going to work as a look in your session. Whereas if you say, great, okay, let's try that, and be really committed to whatever's going on, that's when it starts to really come to life, and that's when it starts to really work.
Go to a website, go to a headshot photographer's website, obviously go to my website, and just click through one set of pictures. Say you pick the girls, and you just look at the eyes, and you go from girl to girl to girl, and you just look at the eyes. They're uneven. Everyone. There's hardly anyone where they suddenly, for some divine intervention of mystery, that they're even. And you look, and then you keep clicking, and you look at mouths, and nobody has a straight mouth either. People always have like, the top lip goes a little bit more to the left or the right. because that's just how your face operates. Because you're right-handed or left-handed, everyone has a differently strung body. That's what makes your face interesting. If it was all symmetrical, it would look really boring.
Often clients will show up and they're a bit nervous and they're a bit this, and you try and relax them. I always take my clients for coffee beforehand to kind of loosen them up a bit, and you know, just so you're not sort of like, you know, hi, what's your name? Yeah, of course. Okay, right, action. You know, I always try and just to get to know a bit about them and to sort of figure them out. And you know, in my eyes are not, you know, not necessarily the same eyes, but you know, it's the same amount of time I spend with a client before taking their photos as maybe a casting director would. You know, you look at them and you sort of think, what is your casting? And you have a very limited amount of time, maybe slightly more actually, because a casting director has to sort of make up their minds in seconds, whereas I take minutes, sometimes hours with my clients. But you kind of have to figure them out very, very quickly. And the one thing that is of my not favorite clients, but the clients I've had the most success with in terms of getting them a shot that will get them through the door is relax and humor me. You know, a lot of clients, I always start my sessions with again, maybe I shouldn't say that because that's giving away a secret, but I always start my sessions with a particular shot. And the reason is because it's the hardest one to do. And we come back to it immediately at the end of the session. And because, you know, you get it out of the way with there and then. They feel like, you know, oh, I've got over the most, you know, difficult hurdle that I have to get across. And yeah, and then from there on, it's all sort of shits and giggles from then on. And you know, I always say to them, you know, if this doesn't work, and I will very quickly tell you if it doesn't, and it's mostly on my part rather than theirs, but I will very quickly tell you if it doesn't work. It's just, the delete button's by my thumb. Do you know what I mean? So just hit delete, and nobody ever needs to see it again.
One skill to have during a session that's useful is not to touch your hair while you're in front of the camera. What happens a surprising amount of times is someone sits in front of the mirror here, and I say, just check your hair and your makeup, and you know, they get into the right top and they get everything perfect, and they're parting and everything is sorted, and they get in front of the camera and I take 2 shots and they reach into their hair and change everything completely. And I say, did you mean to change your hair? And they go, oh, is it different now? And it's sort of, it's an almost unconscious gesture. So I send them back to the mirror and they go, oh no, it's all fucked. So they get their hair back. They come back and it happens again. So this is one skill. Once your hair is right, you get in front of the camera, you don't touch it, and then you look at the photographs, and if they don't work for you, you can change your hair. But you need to give the photography a chance to get that hair in.